Awesome. All righty. So where we're going to pick up today is where we left off last week, which is always a great place to pick it up. And so we're at the very, very bottom of page 108. And, this is the thing is we're in this chapter that's called Two Wives. And, this chapter is one where, oh man, we're in Two Wives. We're in the later chapters. I'm not a wife, or I've never been married, or how does this apply to me? But as we get into this chapter, especially this part of the chapter, man, this is applicable. We're going to talk about the 4 different types of drinkers that are referenced, one of whom may only be a hard drinker, and 3 types of alcoholics. And you know what I found is time after time, we'll go through the 5 types of alcoholics mentioned in the doctor's opinion, and sometimes they don't resonate with people. But man, we can always find ourselves in the 4 types of drinkers in Two Wives, just invariably. And so as we go through this, we're going to have a deep dive into some of the step 1 information. So it's a beautiful review and understanding, what is this illness? What does it look like? And so you don't have to be excited to be joining me and diving in, but I'm excited. Enthusiasm is optional. I was going to say pants mandatory, but I mean, we're on Zoom. Pants also optional. Rock and roll. Just keep the camera up. You know what I mean? All righty. So page 108. So it says the problem with which you struggle usually falls into one of 4 categories. 1. So this is drinker number 1. Your husband may be only a heavy drinker. His drinking may be constant, or it may be heavy only on certain occasions. So we're saying, okay, there's somebody who might be possibly having the earmarks of just a little bit of lack of control, maybe not all the time, but we're just seeing, okay, we're concerned about this person's drinking. And it says, perhaps he spends too much money for liquor. It may be slowing him up mentally and physically, but he doesn't see it. I'm sure we can all relate to maybe a time in our life where we felt like it was slowing us up, or people were telling us they were concerned about it, but we didn't see it. I got my blinders on. No, thank you. I'm good with what I'm doing. Sometimes he is a source of embarrassment to you and his friends. He's positive that he can handle his liquor, that it does him no harm, that drinking is necessary in his business. And we can look back, hey, do I relate to times in my life where I had these walls up? These times in my life where I'm like, no, I'm defending it. You know what I mean? I'm defending it with everything that I got. I need it. I listen, when Bill talks in Bill's story about men of genius conceive their best projects when drunk, the most philosophic constructions of thought was so derived. I mean, I did not have that unmitigated gall. My gall was mitigated because I was pissing my pants behind a dumpster smoking crack. I could not lie to you and tell you, why, yes, this is helping my creative genius, but I would defend it with everything that I had. Now, for me, I didn't have too much time where there's a certain plausibility. So with drinker number 1, the heavy drinker, there's a certain plausibility. Maybe it is important for business, or you know what I mean? Maybe it's, it's not really that big a deal, but let's see. It says he would probably be insulted if he were called an alcoholic. The world is full of people like him. Some will moderate or stop altogether, and some will not. Of those who keep on, a good number will become true alcoholics after a while. And what I want to point out is that really ultimately is the differentiation between the hard drinker and the real alcoholic, or the hard user and the real addict, or the hard compulsive behavior, or the real person who is addicted to that compulsive behavior. It's the ability to stop or moderate. Now, as we go through Two Wives, I like to point out that Two Wives is not these brand new ideas. It is a continuation of threads that we've seen throughout this book up until this point, and including this point. So if you'd like, no pressure, you don't have to. Let's pop over to page 21 just real quick. I like that to say it's optional. I mean, yeah, you guys don't have to come along, but I'm going to go page 21. And at the very top of page 21, this is what we're talking about. Is I'm not going to go to the bottom of page 20, top of 21, but just at the top of page 21, we're talking about the hard drinker. And it says, if a sufficiently strong reason, ill health, falling in love, change of environment, or the warning of a doctor becomes operative, this man can also stop or moderate, although he may find it difficult and troublesome and may even need medical attention. And so what I want to point out is, what is our experience? Has anyone here had a sufficiently strong reason to stop and stay stopped? Anyone here ever fall in love? Have a warning from the doctor, get a change of environment? Have I had any good reasons to stop or to try to moderate? And heck, did I try to stop? Did I try to moderate? And did these things not work? And on page 109, when it says a good number will become true alcoholics after a while, let's keep going on page 21. It says, what about the real alcoholic? He may start off as a moderate drinker. A moderate drinker, take it, leave it alone. Ain't no thing. You know what I mean? He may or may not become a continuous hard drinker. But at some stage of his drinking career, he begins to lose all control of his liquor consumption once he starts to drink. And so what we're talking about here is that idea, that continuation, that there are those of us who might have started out as moderate drinkers, who might have at one point in our life been heavy drinkers, hard users, depending what brings you here today. But there are those of us who find that we drink our way or use our way into being a real alcoholic. Now, many of us feel like we had it from the start, you know what I mean? But I just want to point that out because of the progressive nature of this illness. Often I'll work with people. It's like, no, I think I was a hard drinker. And we talk about when that time was. It was like age 15. At age 15, I was a hard drinker. I might have had my moderate drinking at age 9. You know what I mean? Stuff like that. But what I'm pointing to is just because at one time in my life, I might have had some modicum of control, or maybe I had some power to stay sober. Let's have a look at what is our current experience. And goodness gracious, my current experience is on my own power. Absolutely not. I got no control. I got no choice. All right, let's rock and roll back to page 109. So that is in summary, just a hard drinker. There's some, hey, I'm worried about your drinking. Hey, but it's possible if they're given a good enough reason, they could stop or moderate. Now let's have a look at husband number 2, drinker number 2. It says your husband is showing lack of control, for he is unable to stay on the water wagon even when he wants to. And so when we look at this, when he wants to stay sober, he is unable to stay sober. And so what we're beginning to see is the signs that this person might have the mental obsession. And can I relate to that? Can I look at those times in my life where I said, that's it, I'm never going to do this again. And I wanted to stay sober. I needed to stay sober, but I wasn't able to. Is that my experience? It says, so we can make a little note if we're writing in our book, and why wouldn't we? It's a whole lot of fun. I'm here for the shenanigans. And it's, so you can make a little note and write mental obsession. If you want, again, consensual, you don't have to. All right. And it says he often gets entirely out of hand when drinking. And this might be pointing to that physical allergy, that idea that once I start to drink, I can't control the amount that I take, or once I start to use, or once I start to eat that food that I shouldn't be eating, the food for those of who relate to Overeaters Anonymous, that sort of thing. Once I engage in that compulsive behavior, I cannot stop. So we can make a little note, the physical allergy. And it says he admits that this is true. So one of the things I want to point out, what's a big difference between number 1 and number 2 is number 2 has more willingness. Number 2 has more openness. And number 2 is able to see that, hey, I might have a problem. Number 1, to be fair, might not have a problem. But when I'm looking and working with people, I can also take my vision of their willingness through these 4 types of drinkers. It doesn't matter if I can see that somebody is a real deal, full-blown alcoholic, hopeless addict, if they're like, nothing wrong with me. I can't, you know what I mean? They're not going to grab a hold. So we also see not just the progression of the illness, but what we see is the progression of the willingness. And that's starting to crack open just a little bit here. He admits this is true, but is positive that he will do better. He has begun to try, with or without your cooperation, various means of moderating or staying dry. So when we talk about moderating, he's trying to exert some power over the physical allergy. And when he talks about different ways of staying dry, trying to exert some power over the mental obsession. Have I tried those things? Maybe he is beginning to lose friends. His business may suffer somewhat. He is worried, so we're starting to see some more consequences. He is worried at times and is becoming aware that he cannot drink like other people. He sometimes drinks in the morning and throughout the day also, and that is a sign of the allergy that he's got. Once we start, we have to drink throughout the day, right? That's a sign of, for sure, of the allergy. And it says to hold his nervousness in check. And what I want to point out is 2 things. That nervousness that we're trying to hold in check, it also can be a sign of the physical allergy, that he's drinking to that point where, you know, that morning after anxiety that you feel, you know, the morning after, and it's just that feeling in your chest that grips you. So he's drinking to keep that at bay. It is also possible that he is drinking to keep the nervousness of the spiritual malady at bay. Now, again, I want to point out the spiritual malady is not diagnostic of alcoholism or addiction. There are normal folks with the spiritual malady. I've been saying lately, check out your local PTA or HOA. You will find some spiritually sick, not alcoholics, that's for sure. But what we're seeing is that intentional use of trying to use alcohol or other substances, whatever brings you to the study, to treat that nervousness, whether it be from a sense of separateness from God or whether it be a result of the physical allergy. So he is remorseful after serious drinking bouts and tells you he wants to stop. But when he gets over the spree, he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. And what we see there in that small little sentence is the cycle of alcoholism. And I'm just going to do a quick review just for anyone that's new, and I'll put myself in the little corner. Quick review for anyone that's new, for anyone that's not seen the cycle. This is the thing when I was doing the announcements, I'm like, oh man, I should have put me in the corner. Let's make the joke. Nobody puts baby in the corner. Lots of people put Paige in the corner. That's totally fine. I can be in the corner. But this is the cycle of alcoholism. And when it talks about how it says after he is remorseful after a serious drinking bout. And what we can see is what happens for us is we go through this spree where we burn our life to the ground and we emerge remorseful. We can see that right here. I emerge remorseful. And that guilt and that shame and that, man, I hate myself. I hate what I've done. I can't believe I did this again. That emerging remorseful leads to that firm resolution. Now, that firm resolution is, I never want to drink again. And that's right here. And that's when it says he tells you he wants to stop. And so you see the pain of me going through that spree leads me to that firm resolution. That's it. I'm never going to do it again. And the kicker of what's wrong with me is really every time I came to, every time I said, I do not want to do it again, I meant it. I meant it. I was not lying to you when I said I don't want to do it. I was not lying to me when I said I didn't want to do it. With everything that was in me, I did not want to do it again. But it has no effect. And that's the power of this illness. My desire to stay sober, my need to stay sober, my want to stay sober has no power to keep me sober. And of course, yes, I'm thrust in that spiritual malady, that restless, irritable discontent. There's nothing I can put between me and me. And I want to point out that restless, irritable discontent, that's a doctor that's writing it. You know, it's Dr. Silkworth saying, ooh, the patient appears a little restless, irritable discontent. I don't know about for you guys, but for me, it's like a screaming that's coming from the depths of my soul. How you doing? I'm great. I can't just believe how happy I am to be sober. I'm just dying on the inside. But the hallmark of what truly makes me an alcoholic or an addict or a compulsive, whatever brings you to this study, is the mental obsession. And it's described on 109 as that he begins to think once more how he can drink moderately next time. And that is the inability to differentiate the true from the false. And what is true for somebody like me is once I start, I cannot control the amount that I take. That is what is true beyond a shadow of a doubt. And what is false is this time will be different. Nobody will ever know. I'll go out for 3 drinks, or I'll go out for 3 days, or I just got to get it out of my system. I got to go on a big bender. I'll have a good surrender. It rhymes. Or it looks like I'm going to kill myself anyway, so why don't I get drunk? And that mental obsession kicks in when I am as sober as I am today. But my illness is untreated. And I believe the lie. And I think, you know what? This time will be different. You know what? Nobody will ever know. You know what? I think I'm going to go out for 3 drinks. I believe the lie. Now I take that first drink and I'll get that sense of ease and comfort, but that sets off the allergy, the phenomenon of craving, and I need more. And the more that I drink, the more that I need to drink, and I can't control it. And I'm off on the spree until I emerge remorseful, coming to filled with the guilt and shame and remorse that leads me to say I'm never going to do it again. But that desire has no effect. A day, a week, a month, several months down the line, the mental obsession kicks in, and I have a thought that tells me I can drink, and I believe the lie, and I drink again. And one of the things is that is the cycle. And often we talk about the importance of, finding examples from our own life of the cycle, because this is what alcoholism looks like. This is what addiction looks like. And if I've got examples from my life of this, I am this. And it is a cycle. There is not a way out. Now, I will point out, because we got it on, I don't know where I am on the screen, but we have a way out. Here in 12-step, we have a way out, and the way out is a spiritual awakening. A spiritual experience, an entire psychic change, and that happens as the result of the 12 steps. That is how I get off that cycle. That's how I get to freedom. And it also points out that there's a little bit of a window of willingness. I just want to point that out. When I'm working with people that are new, heck, even if I'm not working with people that are new, if I'm working with people that have been sober a while, but they're miserable and they're dry, what I've found is we all have a window of willingness, where the pain of alcoholism has burnt me to the ground, where I'm willing for a brief moment to take actions that I was not previously willing to take. And if I do not take those actions, that window will inevitably close, and the mental obsession will inevitably kick in, and I will relapse. And as we've been going through the study, what we really emphasize on step 1 is the idea that I will relapse. That's what step 1 is. A relapse for me is inevitable. And so when I see that, I see the hopelessness of my predicament. And if I can see that hopelessness, then I'm willing to take actions I wasn't willing to take previously. So it says, these are the earmarks of a real alcoholic. And it says, perhaps he can still tend to business fairly well. He is by no means ruin everything. As we say amongst ourselves, he want to stop. So that idea, it's number 2. There are some real signs of alcoholism, because again, what is alcoholism? What is this illness? Lack of control, physical allergy, lack of choice, mental obsession. But he doesn't have necessarily all the consequences. Now, if we're here today, we don't need to, if we've got a window of willingness, let's move. We don't need to wait for consequences, but we don't see all the consequences. So let's go on to alcoholic number 3. I try to get away from saying husband number 3, because then we can get locked into the idea that this is talking about one specific type of person. No, this is talking about drunks like me, addicts like me. You know what I mean? Me. I'm the problem. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. By the way, if you're wondering, do I qualify and have I done some work in Al-Anon? Absolutely. So it doesn't matter which orientation I take with this chapter. I'm the problem. It's always me, which is good news, because if I'm the problem, we got a solution. If I'm not the problem, I don't got no solution for that. So good news, I'm the problem. Alrighty. And don't worry, I'm inventorying me all the time because somebody's got to. Problematic over here. Alrighty. So now we have drinker number 3. So this husband has gone much farther than husband number 2. Though once like number 2, he has become worse. So we see the progression through the cycle. It says his friends have slipped away. His home is a near wreck, and he cannot hold a position. Maybe the doctor has been called in, and the weary round of sanitariums and hospitals has begun. When we talk about the weary round of hospitals and sanitariums, we can look at our own experiences. Did we have experiences with emergency rooms? Did we have experiences with psych wards? Did we have experiences with detoxes and rehabs and sober living? I didn't have experience with all of them, but I had experience with enough, and they didn't work. You know what I mean? Do I have experience with that? And it says, he admits he cannot drink like other people, but does not see why. He clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. Now you can make a little note and let's pop over to page 30, because we're gonna bounce around. And again, I always like to point out the information in Two Wives is not brand new information. So we're gonna go page 30 and we're gonna go to the first paragraph. And I'm going in the middle of the paragraph, so bear with me. It says, therefore, well, now, you know what, I'll go most of it, I'll back it up so it's easy to find for everyone. So most of us have been unwilling to admit that we were real alcoholics. No person likes to think he is bodily, physical allergy, and mental obsession, different from his fellows. Therefore, it is not surprising that our drinking careers have been characterized by countless vain attempts. So in vain is fruitless. In vain, it doesn't work. These failed attempts to drink like other people. And this is the line that connects so perfectly with what we were reading on page 110. The idea that somehow, someday he will control and enjoy his drinking is the great obsession of every abnormal drinker. And what we talk about the great obsession, we're talking about the mental obsession. And it's this idea that he will control and enjoy. And here's the deal. I don't know about you guys, but when I was controlling it, I was not enjoying it. Now, for those that are just listening and not watching the screen, I did the little bunny ears for controlling it. What I mean by that is, you know, that situation where you can only physically get 3 beers or 3 whatever, you know, you just get a little bit of it and then it's taken away from you, or you gotta like everything in you whiten out. You got a babysitter that's a good babysitter and they won't let you sneak some more drinks, or you know what I mean? They're watching you, they got eyes. I mean, I am a slippery little alcoholic. I was not well babysat. I'd be off on adventures. Anywho, you know, some of you guys are like, we know. And it's also interesting, if I got to sneak drinks, doesn't that indicate that I got the allergy? Because people that have the ability to control it don't need to sneak it. Just throwing that out there. But here's my experience. If I'm in a situation where there's control or the illusion of control or imposed upon me control, I'm not enjoying it. It is miserable. There is nothing worse that you could do for me than to give me 3 drinks and take it away. That is awful. Oh, we've set off something in me that is screaming for more and I need it, but I can't get it. Now, when I'm enjoying it, you know what I mean? When I'm enjoying it, I am going to town. Thank you. Off I go. You know what I mean? And listen, I got my cocktails. And when I say cocktails, I don't mean literal cocktails. I mean cocktails of substances. Off I go. A little bit of this, even of that, a little bit of that. You know what I'm saying? I'm gone. You know, when there is enjoyment, there is not control. And we know that experientially, but we're looking for a way that somehow, someday, I can get that ease and comfort, but not burn my life to the ground. And we're trying that again and again and again. And so that ties in with page 110, right? He clings to the notion that he will find a way to do so. I'm going to control it. I'm going to enjoy it. And back on page 110, I'll give us a breather. Not a breather, but like, you know, I have a bad habit of bouncing us around. And then but doing it so quickly, it's real hard for people to like, wait, I got to get to the page, you know. Slow down. I'm not good at that. I just go. All right, so back on page 110. So it says, he clings to the notion that he will yet find a way to do so. He may have come to the point where he desperately wants to stop but cannot. That desperate desire is insufficient. And again, we're pointing to that mental obsession. That idea, I desperately do not want to do it again, and yet I do it again. His case presents additional questions which we shall try to answer for you. And I want to point this out. You can be quite hopeful in a situation like this. What? You know what I mean? If you have stage 3 of any illness that happens in stages, do you know what I mean? They're not like, oh boy, good news. It's stage 3. You know what I mean? Hopeful. You know, it's like, oh, thank goodness it's not like stage 4, you know? But we're saying hopeful. And the reason why is for people like us, the more hopeless we are, the better. Because when I come to the end of myself, I'm willing to grab a hold of this thing. Type 1, stage 1, got no problem. There's no problem. I'm fine. Get off my back. Y'all don't know me. You can tell I stayed home a lot when I was a kid. I watched a lot of Maury Povich. Y'all don't know me. I do what I want. It's ingrained in my little brain. But like, they don't got no problems. No problems. You know, so they got no need for a solution. Now, type 2, we saw, right? We saw, still holding on to business fairly well. Some of the delusion, some of the illusion that, I got this thing. But type 3, man, we can see that hopelessness creeping in. And that's good news. That's good news. The more hopeless that I am, the better. And now we got type 4. It says, you may have a husband of whom you completely despair. He has been placed in one institution after another. Anyone here go to rehab after rehab after rehab after rehab, throw in sober living, so throw in detoxes, you know what I mean? Psych ward after psych ward after psych ward. Does that feel familiar? He is violent. Oh, by the way, him being placed in one institution after another is a strong indication of the mental obsession. Because why would I have to go back if I do not drink again? So going to rehab after rehab after rehab, it is a sign, irrefutable evidence that I've got the mental obsession. And then it says, he is violent or appears definitely insane when drunk. And if you're wondering what that is a sign of the physical allergy, right? Because people who are able to control their drinking or drug use stop before violent or definitely insane. Do you know what I mean? I think they stop at buzzed. I hear, like, I for them, that's like red light. For me, the wires are switched. I'm like, green light, go, 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 right? But they're like, ooh, I'm feeling a little tipsy, or ooh, I'm feeling, ooh, that's enough. You know, I'm feeling it. I need to stop. It's like, girl, I don't relate. But you know what I mean? People who have the ability to control the amount they take are not drinking or using themselves into violent or definitely insane. So, and it says sometimes he drinks on the way home from the hospital. Anyone here ever relapse right out of treatment? Anyone here ever relapse in treatment, right? That's what we're talking about. And that's the power of the mental obsession. You know, imagine spending all day in group talking about, you know, the addiction, the counselors are talking about addiction or mental health. And it's like, man, that's a lot. I need a drink. But that is the insanity of our illness. That I can learn all about it all day, but it does nothing to keep me sober. Perhaps he has had delirium tremens. So those signs of the withdrawal, right? That's serious symptoms. And if we have signs of delirium tremens, it's important that we see medical help for a detox process, because DTs can be fatal. We can have seizures, and it can absolutely be fatal. So it says, doctors may shake their heads and advise you to have him committed. We don't necessarily have that in 2024, but that feeling of there's nothing that we can do for him is hopeless. It's a hopeless situation. Maybe you have already been obliged to put him away. This picture may not be as dark as it looks. And if you guys remember in Bill's story, how dark it is before the dawn, you know, it may not be as dark as it looks. Many of our husbands were just as far gone, yet they got well. Yet they got well. And it says, and so before we go into the directions on, hey, how do I help each one? Can we kind of picture it? You guys know we don't. Ooh, if I had planned this ahead of time, I could have done a little poll. You know, that I think Zoom's got a little poll. I don't know if that's true. I just feel like that's a feature it should have. It'd be like, what type of drinker are you? Which sort of husband are you? You know, we could do a little poll. By the way, this is my experience. My experience is most of you are going to tell me you're type 3. You know what I mean? Almost invariably type 3. And sometimes I'm like, girl, you a 4. You a 4, you don't even know it. But yeah, if we're here today, we're probably often type 3. But yeah, I'd love to. I can't listen. I often will multitask poorly. I'm not saying well, I will do it, but poorly. And I don't think I have the capacity to try to multitask a poll in the chat. But for next time, that sounds like a fun idea. All right. So now let's get into the directions on how we help each type of person. Now, keep in mind, as we went through the types, we saw the severity of the illness, but we got a glimpse into the level of willingness that each and every one might have. And if you remember, type 1, hard drinker, very little willingness, no problem, don't have a need for a solution. So it says, let's go back to husband number 1. Oddly enough, he is often difficult to deal with, right? Because I think he's got a problem. Listen, if I'm reading this book and I'm concerned about somebody's behavior, I think he's got a problem, but he doesn't want to do anything about it. He doesn't think he does, you know? So it says he enjoys drinking. It stirs his imagination. His friends feel closer over a highball. Perhaps you enjoy drinking with him yourself when he doesn't go too far. I'm like, I don't relate to much of this. I'm like, the illusion of like, no, it stirs my imagination as I'm vomiting over a curb. So it's illuminating my, it's helping my creativity as I'm like smoking crack until my thumb bleeds. It's fine. And I will tell you, my friends did not feel closer after huddling in a bathroom together, all doing drugs. You know what I mean? We didn't feel more intimately connected. But, for normal folks, I guess that's what happens to them. I don't know. And it says, you have passed happy evenings together, chatting and drinking before your fire. Listen, there has been some fire mishaps when I've been intoxicated. I will own that. That's on me. Perhaps you both like parties, which would be dull without liquor. We have enjoyed such evenings ourselves. We have had a good time. We all know about we know all about liquor as a social lubricant. And this is slightly inappropriate, but it's me. When I was newly sober, like in my first year or so, if people ever asked me hey, would you like a drink? Instead of just saying, no, thank you, I don't drink, I'm sober, like a normal person, I took a very different track. I would tell people, no, alcohol is a social lubricant. Lubed up enough already. Which was just weird. But yeah, I know some of you are not surprised that I would communicate like that. Some of you might be surprised that I'd be invited back to social functions. Not often already. We have enjoyed such evenings ourselves. We had a good time. We all know about liquor as a social lubricant. Some, but not all of us, think it has its advantages when reasonably used. And so what that little sentence is talking about there, it's pointing to the controversy of prohibition, about whether alcohol should be legal or illegal in the United States. And they're trying to say, hey, there are people of us who have no problem with it as for normal drinkers, but that was a hot button topic. And so they're trying to find that God-centered middle path, All right, so let's go to the top of page 111. And what we're going to see is what I like to call the 6 principles of success. And these are so important. But bear with me. Like I would read this and I would fly over my head and I didn't see how it applied. But man, this stuff is life-saving. And this stuff has helped me in ways that I never thought it would. So this is it. Number 1. And this is what to do with somebody who is unwilling, who does not want help, who is not open, who does not think they have a problem. So the first principle of success, number one, is you should never be angry. That's principle one. Now, I want to point something out. Has anyone had a permanent change as a result of somebody's anger? I haven't been able to change myself in a permanent way based solely on their anger. You know what I mean? And I want to. I'm codependent as heck. I don't like it if you're mad at me. It gives me an anxiety that I don't like. You know what I mean? I want to. But anger does not work. But I want to point something out. It can be easy to read top of page 111 and think, man, you're just expecting these women, these non-alcoholics to be saints. You know what I mean? To put up with us, never be angry. No, God, no. What we're going to see, little spoilers for the last principle of success. What it's going to recommend is that this person work the 12 steps themselves. So if there's a human being that I love, that I care about, that maybe has a slightly different, maybe it's this illness, the same illness I have, maybe it's a slightly, it's slightly different illness. That like, man, this is how I can help, is I can work the steps myself. And as Scott put in the chat, hold on, let me get it. In the history of calming down my wife, my wife has never calmed down when I've said, you need to calm down. If there has ever been a less effective way to calm somebody down, it is to verbally communicate, calm down. There's none worse than that. It just doesn't work, you know? And anger doesn't work. But keep in mind, it is not that I have to live the saintly life or suppress my rage. No. What we will do is, it's because like as alcoholics, we will be angry. As alcoholics, we will be resentful. What do we need to do? We need to take it through the columns and we need to do the work ourselves. And so what we're pointing to is something that is not effective. I cannot use rage to get people to do what I think they need to do as a permanent solution. It might work for a little bit, but it's not going to create that permanent change. And it says, even though your husband becomes unbearable and you have to leave him temporarily. Now, what I want to point out is it's not saying sit there and take the abuse. It's saying you can leave, and if you need to leave, and it says temporarily, because man, if I'm here, I'm probably not willing to leave. You know what I mean? Last week, we were talking about the chapter 2 wives is far more the chapter to those who are as bound to the alcoholic as the alcoholic is bound to alcohol. That I probably will come back, even if I don't want to, due to my own codependency, due to my own mental obsession, right? We saw how the cycle of the alcoholic is mirrored by the cycle of the Al-Anon. I'm done. I'm never going to be with this stupid jerk who does it again. Oh, but he went to detox. It'll be different this time, you know? And that same cycle. It says, you should, if you can, go without rancor. And rancor means that bitterness, that resentment. Patience and good temper are most necessary. And again, it's not asking me to be a saint. What we're going to see is how I get freedom from anger, how I get patience, and how I get good temper. I can't pull it out of my butt. I can't. I need to actively and intentionally work these 12 steps as a way of life. And God's love, God's peace, God's temper, God's patience can flow through me. But that's principle number 1. Now, this is principle number 2. Our next thought is that you should never tell him what he must do about his drinking. That's principle number 2. So we don't try to control them. It doesn't mean we don't offer advice. It does not mean we don't set boundaries. It does not say we don't communicate. Has anyone ever told us what we should do about our drinking or our drug use? How well did that work? Not well. Not well. It was not and that's the thing. We read this through the lens of like, man, no, it's like it doesn't work. And that's part of why I pointed out it was Bill that wrote this chapter, because Bill's singular focus is what is going to be helpful and effective to alcoholics. Nagging is not an effective strategy. As somebody who has nagged, I've employed nagging. It has not worked. Does not work. And it says, if he gets the idea that you are a nag or a killjoy, your chance of accomplishing anything useful may be 0. He will use that as an excuse to drink more. He will tell you he is misunderstood. This may lead to lonely evenings for you. He may seek someone else to console him, not always another man. And isn't that true, that we use people's criticisms of us to hurt them more? Do you know what I mean? That's the type of people we are. If I'm getting defensive or reactive, I'm on the back foot. It's because they're right. And I want to point something out. Let's pop over to page 90 and 91. And the reason I want to point out page 90 and 91 is it's in the chapter Working with Others. Where we want to go is bottom of page 90, very, very bottom paragraph. Oh, yes, we were on page 111, and now we're on the very bottom of page 90, but we'll be going back to 111 because I don't do things in a simple and easy way. I make things difficult. Title of any inventory I've ever written on any part of my life. All right, bottom of page 90. And so these are directions for working with others. And again, I want to point out that theme, that thread that we're seeing through working with others. It's going to continue on into 2 Wives. It says, if he does not want to see you, never force yourself upon him. So we're not forcing this on people. Neither should his family hysterically plead with him to do anything, nor should they tell him much about you. They should wait for the end of his next drinking bout. You might place this book where he can see it at the interval. Here, no specific rule can be given. The family must decide these things. But urge them not to be over anxious, for that might spoil matters. The more we put, here's my experience, is the more that I've been pushed, the more that I'm resistant. Yeah, that's my experience. And it says, usually the family should not try to tell your story. When possible, avoid meeting a man through his family. Approach through a doctor or an institution is a better bet. And it goes on to say, if your man needs hospitalization, he should have it, but not forcibly unless he's violent. And so it's that idea that, man, and we saw this last week on page 18. I won't necessarily take us there, but on page 18, it's with our family, with our loved ones. That's where our defenses are up. That's where our walls are up. And so me trying to nag somebody to get, well, man, it just doesn't work. So back to page 111. All righty. And I'm doing that like natural. It's a very natural pause, so we can all get there. Cool. Drag and roll. All right. So this is principle number 3, the third principle of success. Be determined that your husband's drinking is not going to spoil your relations with your children or your friends. And ultimately, to summarize what it's saying, it is do not isolate yourself. Continue to have relationships outside of that codependent relationship with the alcoholic, with the drug addict, or with the person who does not want help. And it's one of those things I'm like, oh man, I'm gonna bounce this around again. I'm sorry, guys. Let's pop over. Let's pop over to page 102. I'm sorry. I know it's my ADHD. It's like rock and roll. I mean, it's not diagnosed or anything, and it's weird that you guys would think I even have that. God, how could you think that? Just all over the place. So 102, and it's in that middle paragraph, and it says in the very middle paragraph. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph, but what I want to point out is, while you were drinking, near the bottom of the middle paragraph, while you were drinking, you were withdrawing from life little by little. And in that, we start the thread, and probably continue the thread, to be honest, that we're going to see in these later chapters about how drinking and using isolates the family, it isolates the home, it isolates the alcoholic. And to continue to live in isolation does not work. All righty, so back to 111. Yeah, rock and roll. And by the way, I'm going to bounce this around again real quick. I'm so sorry. And it says, so going back to 111, this is number 3. Be determined that your husband's drinking is not going to spoil your relations with your children or your friends. They need your companionship and your help. It is possible to have a full and useful life even though your husband continues to drink. Now that is a promise, but that is a promise we first saw on page 97. Let's pop over to page 97. I know, it's like, girl, you're more unhinged than normal. No, it's worse. Let's go to the very bottom paragraph of page 97. And it says, though an alcoholic does not respond, there is no reason why you should neglect his family. You should continue to be friendly to them. The family should be offered your way of life. Now, the way of life, these 12 steps, should they accept and practice spiritual principles, the 12 steps, there's a much better chance that the head of the family will recover. And even though he continues to drink, the family will find life more bearable. So we're going to see this tie in with our sixth principle of success, but also that idea of like, even if the person that I want to get well does not get well, if I work these 12 steps as a way of life, I can still be okay. So back to 111. I know. So it says, going back to that paragraph 111, we know women who are unafraid, even happy under these conditions, that we can have this full life, even though those that we love are struggling. And this is suggestion number 4, principle of success number 4. It says, do not set your heart on reforming your husband. You may be unable to do so no matter how hard you try. And to summarize that principle is to let go of the outcome, because the outcome is not in my hands. Now, it's a reminder that where is the outcome? It's in God's hands. You know, so much in this book, we talk about leaving the results, the outcome, God's hands, God's hands, God's hands. I don't have the control. So again, quick summary. It is first principle of success, never be angry. Number 2, don't tell them what to do, what they must do. That doesn't mean we don't set boundaries about their behavior as it pertains to us. But 1, never be angry, never tell them what they should do. Number 2, 3, maintain those relationships outside of that relationship. 4, let go of the outcome. Let go of the outcome. All right. And got 2 more. It says, we know these suggestions are sometimes difficult to follow, but you will save many a heartbreak if you can succeed in observing them. They're suggesting them not because it's easy, but because from Bill's experience, this is what would be most helpful in helping somebody who is unwilling. It says your husband may come to appreciate your reasonableness and patience. This may lay the groundwork for a friendly talk about his alcoholic problem. Try to have him bring up the subject himself. And we're going to see that as a theme, that idea of like, okay, like I'm not going to initiate. We're going to let this person bring up this subject of their problem. And it says, be sure you are not critical during such a discussion. And again, criticism has not led me to anywhere that I needed to be. Listen, I can get there a little. You can criticize me a little, but I'm going to be resentful, a little bit spiteful. I mean, I'm saying if I don't inventory it and do my own work, you know what I mean? It does not work. Criticism does not work. Nagging does not work. Anger does not work. It just doesn't work. And it says, attempt instead to put yourself in his place. And we saw that. Now, I won't bounce us all the way over to page 90 again, but we saw that at the top of page 90, where it was really trying to seek to understand and to be understood. Think about it from their perspective, what would be most helpful. Let them see that you want to be helpful rather than critical. And that idea of being helpful is a theme throughout this whole book. When a discussion does arise, you might suggest he read this book, or at least the chapter on alcoholism. Now, I would be remiss if I didn't make the page 112 joke. You know, sometimes there are people that are like, hey, what you got to do is you got to go open up to page 112, read the first 3 words and follow the directions. And you open it up, 112, read this book. Now, I always like to add, if I'm going to go to page 112 and follow the directions, read this book. Yeah. I might as well go to page 32 and follow the first 3 words and follow those directions. I will save you the time. It says more than once. So read this book more than once. Page 112, page 32. That's just so you have that little pocket joke that will annoy people after a while. I'm just letting you know, they'll find it annoying, but that doesn't mean stop. I mean, maybe it does. I mean, maybe that's the thrust of what this is saying in this chapter, and I should glean the deeper meaning. Anywho, have him read this book, or at least the chapter on alcoholism. So pointing to the chapter more about alcoholism. Tell him that you have been worried, though perhaps needlessly. You think he ought to know the subject better, as everyone should have a clear understanding of the risk he takes if he drinks too much. Show him you have confidence in his power to stop or moderate. Say that you do not want to be a wet blanket, that you only want him to take care of his health. Thus, you may succeed in interesting him in alcoholism. And I will say some of it is a little manipulative, because obviously if I am worried about somebody and I went to the trouble of buying the book Alcoholics Anonymous for my loved one that I absolutely think is an alcoholic, I'm probably not, you know what I mean? I'm probably not. I have every confidence. But to summarize, this is the fifth principle of success. And to summarize this, it is to give them the information and give them the dignity of their own experience. To let them have their experience with their illness, or whether or not they have it. You know what I mean? Let them make their own mistakes. Let them have their own experience. So give them the information, but truly, 5, give them the dignity of their experience. He probably has several alcoholics among his own acquaintance. You might suggest that you both take an interest in them. Drinkers like to help other drinkers. Goodness, isn't that true? You know, I joke around about like, who wants the sponsor? But truly, I had a thing in my heart. I wanted to help people. I really did. But man, I just wasn't able to. You know what I'm saying? And it says your husband will be willing to talk with one of them. Or your husband may be willing to talk with one of them. If this kind of approach does not catch your husband's interest, it may be best to drop the subject, but after a friendly talk, your husband will usually revive the topic himself. This may take patient waiting, but it will be worth it. Here's the 6th principle of success. Meanwhile, you might try to help the wife of another serious drinker. If you act upon these principles, your husband may stop or moderate. And if I were to help somebody, how do I help them? Well, I've got to help them through working these 12 steps, because that's the message and that's the help that we have to offer each other. Of course, emotional support, but yeah. So what we see is these 6 principles of success. I should never be angry. I should never try to force them to do anything, tell them what they must do. I shouldn't isolate myself. I need to let go of the outcome, let go of the results. I need to give them the dignity of their experience. And I need to work the program myself and go help somebody who wants my help. That's what I need to do. And it's one of those things, man, I promise you, I have people that I love and that I care about. And when they are struggling and they are suffering and they're out on a spree, or they're just not open and there's nothing I can do, what I remember is the alcoholic or the drug addict that is sitting in front of me is that person to somebody else. So whoever I'm working with, whoever I'm sitting in front of, or whoever Zoom screen I'm sharing, it's a reminder that, man, there is somebody in their life who would give anything if that person could get sober. And so I direct all that energy to that person. And that is helpful. And one of the things I want to say is these principles of success are so useful, not just in dealing with people who don't want to get well, but sometimes in dealing with people that don't know they are unwell. Dealing with people who are dying, dealing with people who have serious chronic illness, dealing with people who have dementia or psychosis. These same principles are not just applicable in this narrow context of a husband and wife in the 1930s and they're heteronormative. No, these are principles that work when somebody is suffering and somebody that is in pain and they are unable or unwilling to get help, either or. Because sometimes if it's things like dementia, you know what I mean? There's not much we can do. And these same principles apply. And I promise you they work. And I don't have time to get into some of the stories, but I want you to know that they have saved my butt in times when I could not have made it through otherwise. So truly there is value in them. And next week we're going to pick up and see what we can do with husband 3 or drinker number 2, 3, and 4. And I hope you'll join me because I like to have a lot of fun. So we'll pick it up right there when where we left off next week. I'll stop the recording and we can all pray together.